Everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm the Chess Nerd, and today we're going to be reviewing the games from Beat Me at Chess, win a 2022 chess calendar from the Chess Nerd Co. limited edition of 64. If you beat me in this challenge online, only on the Discord, you would win a free calendar. Let's look at the games. So we're going to review every single game and its critical moments. So we're going to start with the very first game of the challenge. We go here with, of course, we start off with a Bong Cloud here by Hikaru Yukihime. And then, shortly after, it didn't go that well for them. But this was a fun game overall. I ended up winning their queen about here with queen e2, dropping the queen on e2 after bishop takes, and now this was a free win home. Next game, going for that CM, I played bishop c5 here, preventing black from castling short. And now after they wanted to kick my bishop with b6, I had rook e1 here. And what happens is that if you take my bishop, which happens in the game, well, I take yours with check. And this creates a small fork, checking the king and winning this free pawn on c5. And from here, it was very hard for black to recover, and I won a free bishop on h5. Next game. Game number 3 was a very short one, despite my opponent being very strong, 2,000 rated there, as you see. It ended really shortly after my opponent failed to see a very nice checkmate in 1 here. And so we move on to the fourth game of the challenge. Here, after playing f4 to discoordinate the knight, my opponent plays the mistake bishop g6. And what happens here is that if I take this knight with my pawn, well then bishop takes my rook, right? So I take this knight with my rook, sacrificing my rook, and if the pawn were to take, which happened in the game, I get 2 pieces for this rook, and I pick up this nice material here. And from here, it was pretty easy. I just had to place in some threats, and my opponent lost on time here. Very tough to defend this. Game number 5. Here I went with queen h5 very early on in the game, and then attacking very aggressively here after f takes, rook takes, and now knight e7. Queen takes e5, and now knight f5, threatening mate on g7, which my opponent missed, and then I just capitalized with queen takes g7 checkmate. Game number 6. Here, my opponent had a very nice start. As you can see, I have doubled pawns. I have backward double pawns here, actually, and I'm very crumpled up in my own position here. My opponent had a really good start, but then shortly after here, sadly after knight h5, queen g4, a terrible blunder, giving away their queen, and I just took, and they resigned here. Game number 7 against Golda, my student. Here I played e4, discovery on this knight and knight on this knight. After knight takes d5, this is still fine. Bishop takes, and now I'm threatening 3 of her pieces here. This is a very tough position to defend. Here, white should have just taken this pawn to avoid 2 of the threats, and then after bishop takes, at least again a bishop and a pawn for the material loss, which is a rook. This would have been quite equal, actually. But she played rook b1, and now I took the knight, still attacking 1 knight in case if they take my bishop, I take a knight, and I'm still a knight up, right? So takes, and now here I'm left with a full piece up for a pawn. And eventually I just won, liquidated everything, and won the game like this. And we ended here in a checkmate. A beautiful checkmate at that. Game number 8 against Blicard. Here Blicard had a very established attack. Very strong, potentially dangerous. I counter here with queen a5, threatening on a2, right? Something here with a battery. b3 to defend this a2 pawn surreptitiously. I play c4, gaining that space for my knight. Actually, a brilliant move if you ask me. Knight d4, and now my position got a little out of balance. Blicard sacrificed the exchange on h5, and now here I triple my pieces right here on the a file, and this a2 square is very, very hard to defend, and this is how I won here. My opponent resigned. Next game, game number 9. We played here knight c4, and after I traded, it was just an easy pawn escalation until I won a free piece. Well, I have rook up here, and this was easily won. Game number 10 against Lil Krina. Here I took a pawn on b7. This king is uncastled due to the traxor, which was played earlier in the game. Rook b8, and now here I capitalize on this king that's very exposed. And here I win a rook, right? So with queen a3, I fork the king and win a rook. The rook cannot come defend in time because it's unprotected on b4 simply. And so sooner thereafter, I play takes, win another rook, and then win a queen with this nice pin on the queen here. And that's how I won game 10. Game 11, c6. I made a mistake, and I'm losing here if you ask me. Rook takes, queen takes, and knight c7. Fork on my queen and my rook. This was very painful, and this was the closest one to a win that happened today. Takes, and now c5. So now I have to not exchange material, be very, very careful to not lose. If I lose a calendar. b5, and now here, well, this is not the best situation for black, for me, right? But at least I have a passed pawn here, and I use that to play c3. And now white have problems. This is still equal, but here it goes for the worst after I have my pawn protected, and now my knight targeting c2. So that my pawn doesn't queen, white exchanged off the exchange, which made us equal. Well, actually me, I have a pawn up here in the knight endgame, and that's surely winning. So we play it out here. And now after g5 and f5 mistake, this lets me play king e5 to control the e4 square, to control my d3 square for my passed pawn. So after takes, this was a quick win with the queen here. This was the closest game of the tournament. And now for game 12. For game 12, this was the craziest game of the tournament. Knight takes c7 here, attacking my rook. And I did not care. I played bishop takes h3, a dubious sacrifice. Here, if the pawn takes my bishop, I have mate directly on f2 with rook takes f2, checkmate. If the king takes, it's a toss-up. King takes, rook takes f2, and I'm threatening checkmate. I calculated it a bit. I'm not sure if it was winning. So here, white played bishop at d5 to defend this checkmate threat. Rook takes f2 anyways, reinitiating this threat on g2, and now rook g1. Here, I played queen f4 check. And I missed this, actually. White is fine if they take on h3, crazy enough. Although it looks like it's completely losing, it's actually not. White survive here, but my opponent played what I calculated, king h1, and now I have queen h4. And this discovery, double checkmate, is unavoidable, and my opponent, I think, took here, and then this is just checkmate. But this is mate in any way, shape, or form you like it. Best I can think of is this, double check on the king. King has to move, and now queen h1 checkmate. Game number 13, I think. So this one was a cute game. I think it ended pretty quickly. I took here, and then I took this exchange up. And now here was a spectacular move, actually. Queen h5, sacrificing my bishop, actually unprotecting my bishop and defending my rook. If black were to take my bishop here, I have queen h7 check. And this resumes with checkmate here in a few moves. So my opponent didn't do that. Instead, they played queen a5. This is completely losing, by the way, for black. Knight c3 to shield this check. And now here I have a quick mate on g7. What a game that was. Game number 13, I think. Here, after bishop h4, I had a nice queen g4. And after bishop takes on g3, do I take back this bishop? Of course not. I play queen takes g7, threatening a bigger piece on h8. And still threatening this bishop on g3. Queen h4 threatening checkmate on h2. I did not let myself get checkmated here. I took this bishop with an attack on this queen. Queen takes h5, and now I take a full rook up. This was my advantage the whole game. And then we simmered down to just a full rook up, in which I liquidated and won with knight c5, winning for sure a knight. And we move on to the last game of the entire challenge. Here, I was uncertain at the beginning because I played king f6, very dubious move. After g5, my king has to go back. And eventually it got better. I got the open file, right? So I trade here, and now I play rook c3. And this pawn cannot be defended. This hurts and stings for white. h4, now I take the pawn, and now they let me take the bishop as well. So then from here, I have a full piece up, and it was pretty easy to liquidate. Rook c3 here, forcing knight d3. And I think I just have king d5, and eventually I'll win this knight and this is very, very winning. My opponent resigned here. That was it for Beat Me at Chess, win a 2022 chess calendar. Little promo, there's 48 chess calendars left. There's only 48 left in the entire world. I made them in a custom limited edition. Get yours now before the New Year's. Have an amazing day, and thanks for watching.
Go sub to the Chess Nerd, there we have the channel.